Thanks everybody for tuning in. Today I'm going to talk about social science insights to improve grassland conservation on private lands, and hopefully this will help you think about how to do conservation delivery within the Mississippi Flyway. So my name is Ashley Gramza. Some of you may know me. I am a conservation social scientist with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, and I always think it's really important to understand, or I'm always really interested in understanding the background of a presenter, because it really helps to kind of set the stage and the context for their presentation and where they're coming from in their training. So I have degrees in both wildlife ecology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and human dimensions of natural resources at Colorado State University. And private lands conservation has always been something very near and dear to my heart. My first job outside of undergrad was as a private lands biologist for the Iowa DNR, and I learned a lot about private lands conservation and grassland conservation because I was set up in the Prairie Potholes region of northern Iowa in the Des Moines Lobe. I was in Fort Dodge. And then I've also been working a lot on bird conservation issues because my prior position, I worked as the National Bird Conservation Social Science Coordinator. So I've got an opportunity to work with a lot of the joint venture coordinators and science coordinators, and I still stay very active in bird conservation through the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies Bird Conservation Committee, the North American Bird Conservation Initiative, and the Bird Plans Unified Science Team. So I try to still stay involved as well. So right now, as I just mentioned, I now work at a state wildlife agency. I work for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, and I'm still working on a lot of private lands issues. Kind of my first project, I came to Arkansas about 2 years ago, and my first project was working on rice fields with waterfowl conservation, but I understand that that is not exactly relevant to this discussion, but I am starting to work with our quail coordinator to look at some grassland conservation issues and some work with cattle producers in the part of Arkansas that is composed of the Central Hardwoods joint venture, or the part of Arkansas that's within the joint venture. So why do we care about private lands? Well, basically grassland conservation on private lands is essential, and especially within the Mississippi Flyway, because so much of this flyway is within private ownership. And so if we don't get private landowners to do grassland conservation, we're not going to really have any grasslands. And so it's really, really important to understand how and why landowners and different groups adopt conservation behaviors, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to convince them to do different things to conserve grasslands. And also, social science information can be the deciding factor behind a program's success. So I've heard lots of stories from different conservation agencies that said, you know, we worked with all the top conservationists in this field to create this wonderful program, and then we got the funding for it, and then we rolled it out, and nobody signed up for it. And so when that happened, we finally talked to the landowners and we realized that we had this one component that nobody liked. And so it's really, really important before you start setting up a program to understand the demand for a program and what types of things that landowners will accept and need, because that is just as important as the biological aspects of the conservation program or practice of interest. Also, it's really, really, really important to understand landowner behavior in grassland ecosystems, because grasslands are an early sterile stage that need constant management, and just not constant management, but need regular management and disturbance. So you can't just have somebody enroll in a program, restore a grassland, and then set it and forget it. Even after the conservation program ends, if people don't do management, the grassland will not stay in grass. So it's very, very important to understand those different behaviors and how to get people to continue practices even after programs end. Okay, so yes, we know all these things. We have private lands biologists, but why is the social science important? Well, it definitely adds value because it can help increase the adoption and efficiency of conservation practices. It helps us know how a broad user base thinks about something if we look at motivations or thought patterns in a systematic way over a specific time period or region or group of people. It also can increase the effectiveness of our conservation delivery. If we know exactly what people want and how to connect with them, we're not going to come up with these roadblocks that we might have had in the past. Also, social science can help with the transferability of program success. So if you create a wonderful conservation program in Minnesota, if you utilize social science to integrate theory to understand some of these bigger picture ways of thinking, then it's easier to transfer those findings to other regions and places. So it really helps us do conservation more efficiently. Also, social science really helps with the durability of grassland conservation. So if we know how to promote conservation behaviors and management, we can continue that support after these programs end, or learn how to enroll people in different programs or other sorts of projects. Okay, so now I'm just going to give you, now that I gave you the big picture, I'm going to give you an overview of what I will be talking about in this particular presentation. So I figure I could give you a literature view, but I figured the most important thing is to go through and figure out how social science can actually be applied to all aspects of conservation delivery. So I'm going to go through and basically integrate insights from the literature to talk everybody through how social science can help you with conservation program or practice development, with program or practice promotion, with program or practice evaluation, and with program durability. So I'll kind of be using program and practice interchangeably because you may be focusing on a specific practice or you may be developing a specific conservation program, and either way, the lessons should be the same. Finally, I will give you some tips on how to actually integrate social science into your efforts, because many organizations and joint ventures don't have social scientists on their staff or on their management board, so it's important to figure out how you can tap into social science expertise in your area. The great news is there are amazing social scientists within the Mississippi Flyway, so there are a lot of people that you can tap into. Okay, so when you're developing a conservation program, it's really the most important thing to think about is simplicity and flexibility. It's important to keep the application process as short as possible from both paperwork and turnaround time. I know this is sometimes difficult because you want to make sure that we're getting a return on investment, but over and over again in the literature, this is really important to actual program adoption. Also, minimizing reporting requirements is very important. So it's really important to think about what sort of minimum reporting will help you understand whether or not a program is actually working for bird conservation. Also, allowing for multiple management options is important because it helps to fit into the pre-existing farm plans of a specific landowner. So if you can fit into what they're already doing, but just enhance it and make it as easy as possible, that increases your chances of adoption and durability immensely. And also, this information can be gleaned in a variety of ways. At the beginning of a program, I find that focus groups are probably the best ways of gleaning this information based on the people you're trying to target your program on. So next, we'll talk about program promotion. So once you figure out how to develop the program, what the demand is for the program, what people want, you need to promote the program. If people don't know about the program, then they're not going to be able to sign up. And so when you're promoting the program and coming up with messages to promote said program or practice, it's really, really important to rely on trusted sources. And so to find out who is a trusted source, you have to actually talk to the landowners as well. So that's where social science comes in. So again, we want to use trusted sources of information to promote the program. So depending on your area, that trusted source of information could be the Natural Resources Conservation Program, it could be the joint venture, it could be university extension, it could be the Soil Conservation District. cropland services, a variety of different organizations. So it's important to find out which ones are trusted. You also want to make sure that you seek support from any program or seek support from important community members of any program or practice. So you need to get into the community and figure out who people trust and get those people to sign on, because those people will help you promote your program. And if other landowners see that somebody they trust is doing the program themselves or supporting the program, they're way more likely to sign on. Another thing that's really important, if it's a program that's already been developed and not brand new, it's important to let current participants provide testimony. There's been a lot of research in recent years looking at landowner-led workshops about conservation programs, and these have shown to be really, really effective because norms are really, really important predictors of behavior adoption. And so it's important for farmers and other types of landowners to learn from people like themselves. And this helps kind of allay fears of program enrollment. Next, you want to make sure that you tailor your messaging to the specific group or population of interest. I put this picture up here because if you're wanting to target women landowners, you probably should have women running the workshops. And I know in the last decade or so, I've seen a lot of these women-led workshops and women-led learning circles pop up, and they've been pretty effective. So if you can, work with a social scientist to segment your potential participants based on different wildlife or environmental values. Then you can use these segmented groups to test different messages or promotional materials that appeal to these different groups. This will help with increasing your adoption. Also, another big lesson from the literature is we really want, it's really easy to talk about the bottom line financially, but we find in the literature that when you reinforce stewardship motivations and don't talk about money first thing, then that kind of activates the motivations within the farmer, and they're more likely to maintain the program after it ends and more likely to adopt the program if they think that they're a good steward of the land. I mean, eventually you will have to talk about money, but when we talk about money first, that activates financial motivations and might not get what we need from that. It's also really important to stress, I mean, this seems kind of intuitive, but it's important to stress the benefits of adopting the program, how it's going to help yields, and how it's going to reduce risk. Landowners are usually, especially farmers, are usually pretty risk averse, so risk reduction is very, very important. Also, instead of leading with negative perceptions or misconceptions of the program, you want to minimize those misperceptions and focus on the benefits and downplay the negative perceptions. Next, once people are signed up for the program or doing the practice, you need to make sure you provide support. Check in early and check in often. Make sure that you provide support with all aspects of the program. From starting to help them with the application, to helping them with the actual management practices, whether that be grazing or burning or any other types of disturbance on the grasslands. It's important to help them with reporting. People might not understand what reporting you're looking for and how to present that, so it's important to check in to make sure that everybody knows how to report properly so that they don't run the risk of being kicked out of the program. It's also important to help them out with the evaluation of the program, ask them how the program's going and if they have any feedback. And really important, it's important to, before the program ends, make sure that you're able to work with them to figure out how to continue that conservation once the program ends, whether that be converting to a different program, getting cattle to graze on the grassland, or getting a program into an easement or other sort of practice. And then it's really important to provide opportunities for participants to connect with one another throughout the process and share experiences. Some programs do a yearly landowner workshop where landowners can get together and just talk to each other and have networking and fellowship and figure out what's working and what's not working, and allows them to share different resources and equipment or create burn associations. I know with COVID, it's not as feasible, but hopefully over the next couple years, we'll be able to do in-person meetings like we used to be able to do. As I mentioned in the program support slide previously, it's really important to evaluate your program and to hear from landowners. And so I find that it's really helpful. I mean, you can definitely ask people how it's going themselves, but it's really also important to provide an anonymous and consistent way for participants to provide feedback. So it's really, really difficult for especially people in the Midwest to tell conservation delivery practitioners what's not going right. So I find that surveys and online surveys really help with that, or providing an outside source to collect information also helps with that. However, collecting evaluation information is just one part of the evaluation. You then have to analyze those data and adapt your program accordingly. I'll use an example from Arkansas. We just recently started a private lands program on rice fields to benefit waterfowl conservation. And every year that we've done the program, we've changed it a little bit based on feedback. And that has allowed us, to write a NRCS voluntary public access program grant to expand the program threefold. And I don't think we would have been able to get enough people to participate in the program had we not asked how the program was working for them and changed it accordingly. Okay, so you've gotten landowners through the program. The money is about to run out. Now what? So again, it's really, really, really important to have the durability of your financial investment. You just paid people to do conservation work for 10 years, and we want to make sure that those conservation benefits are felt for the long term. So how do we keep the durability of those conservation benefits? And with grass, it's especially important, like I mentioned before, it's especially important because grass requires regular disturbance. Even if they don't convert it back to crops or develop the land, they're still going to have to burn or graze or disturb it in some other way. So one way to do this that the literature tells us is it's really important to reinforce the benefits of their participation in the program by showing results. If the program was specifically set up for quail conservation, make sure you show them quail coveys or show them results from point counts, or better yet, take them out to do the point counts. That really helps to, again, activate that stewardship motivation and ensure that landowner will do those management actions after the program ends and after the payments stop. Also, it's really important to, again, provide that support to continue management, whether that be helping to set up burn associations, helping with equipment rental, helping with finding funding to fence off land or for grazing, helping them get access to cattle and do rotational grazing is all really, really important, especially for landowners that don't have any experience doing these sorts of things, but who may need financial assistance to continue these practices. So you might not be able to provide the assistance, but other people can, or they might be able to get income through cattle. Or, there's also programs like easements and land trusts that you could also talk with the landowner about before the program ends. Okay, last but certainly not least, it's really, 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 really important that you share your lessons from conservation delivery with other conservation professionals. So if you created a program that just nobody signed up for, or created a program that everybody signed up for, please let the community know so we can learn from each other. We were actually, so as part of the North American Bird Conservation Initiative Private and Working Lands Subcommittee, they were setting up a private lands conservation summit that was going to be held in person in Kansas City, Missouri last March. But then COVID happened, and so we have delayed the initial private lands conservation summit to either this spring or summer, and we'll probably have some sort of hybrid approach with virtual and on-site field days. So we're still figuring out how that's actually going to look, but the whole point of this was to actually create a forum where private lands conservation delivery practitioners can meet and work with each other and talk about lessons learned and help to do better conservation. We can't learn from others unless we share our experiences. Okay, so I just told you why conservation or why social science is so important and what you should do, but it all involves collecting social science information. And if you're not a social scientist or you don't have access to social science expertise, or your organization doesn't have any capacity, how do you do that? So one, you can just do a search for prior literature. There have been many social science studies of private lands conservation conducted across the Mississippi Flyway. It's been mostly focused on the Conservation Reserve Program, but there's a lot of other studies as well. And so a quick search for literature might help you gain some insight. You might actually find that there's already been data collected on the people that you're interested in. So you can check that box and use that information to help you. It will also help you pinpoint a social scientist to work with. Look for the first author and connect with them and see if they might be, if it's an older study, they might be actually updating the information or working on a project that you could sign on to help with the work that you're doing. And two, you want to actually consult a social scientist. This doesn't always mean that you actually have to provide funding for a consultant or for a graduate student. There are many state agency social scientists like myself who are available for consultation. We've also, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency's Social Science and Human Dimensions Subcommittee is in the process, in conjunction with the Human Dimensions Working Group of the Wildlife Society and other organizations, are starting to come up with a directory of conservation social scientists. We're still in the early stages of getting social scientists to sign up, but it is available for use right now at this website, and it provides a nationwide map with dots on it where you can find somebody in your region to reach out to. And everybody that signs up for the directory assents to being contacted. So it's definitely okay to contact anybody on that list. And we hope to increase the sign up in future months. And then another thing that I always want to encourage bird conservation professionals to do is think beyond surveys. Surveys are great for generalizing to a large region or a large population, but they don't really help you understand how or why people are doing something. So it's usually much better to adopt some sort of mixed methods approach where you're doing both quantitative survey research and qualitative research from with focus groups or interviews. I also wanted to take a second to provide some cool studies that I thought would be informative for your work. These were also the studies that I focused on a lot in the creation of this presentation. Two of them are reviews of adoption, landowner adoption behavior of conservation programs across the US, and they're pretty great. And all of these papers are open access, so you should have access. Well, actually, I think the third one may not be, but I can definitely send you the PDF if you need it. So the first two are reviews of qualitative and quantitative social science research on private lands. And the third one focuses on segmentation of private landowners focused on grassland conservation specifically. And then the last one is part of the project that I worked on in my last job that looked at conservation reserve program practice, adoption, and durability in the southern Great Plains. So again, focused on the grassland system, but outside of this flyway, and that one is open access. So that is all I have for today. But definitely please email me or call me with questions. I know you can't ask questions because nobody's listening in right now. But yeah, this was fun, and hopefully this was informative and I didn't tell you things that you already knew. Thank you.